Hi, everybody. Hello and welcome. My name is Lee Wind. I'm a frequently challenged author of books like The Gender Binary is a Big Lie, and I'm also the Chief Content Officer for the nonprofit Independent Book Publishers Association, which we call IBPA for short. Book banning has become a bit like a runaway train with efforts to restrict the availability of books featuring Black, immigrant, queer, and other underrepresented characters, themes, and history at an all-time high. Really what we're talking about is that it's the chilling effect. It's that librarians and teachers are almost afraid to bring in books, even though they know it will be helpful to the students or their patrons, because they're nervous about the backlash. It's kind of created this unsafe environment. This really impacts independent publishers more than the big corporate publishers who are also selling Bibles and books by conservative politicians. This impacts book creators, authors, illustrators, translators, and young readers most of all, because what it does is it further marginalizes those who have less privilege, less access, and less representation to begin with. So in response, IBPA and EveryLibrary Institute teamed up to create a program called We Are Stronger Than Censorship. So here's the pitch. For every book that's banned or challenged between September 1st and September 30th, 2024, We Are Stronger Than Censorship is going to buy 2 or more books from independent publishers and donate them via regional freedom to read organizations and also national partners. The idea is to turn the negativity and fear into positivity and love in the form of books. We have the creators of 2 of those books here with us today. Phillip Cortez, who is the author of I'll Be the Moon. Phillip, you want to say hi?
Hey, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Lee.
Oh, hold up the book.
Oh, well, yeah, let's hold it up. There it is. The Moon. I'll Be the Moon, a migrant child's story.
And that's from Collective Book Studio. And the illustrators was Mafs Rodriguez Alpide.
Alpide is how
Alpide. Thank you for pronouncing it correctly.
She's a genius in her own right. Yeah, I was really fortunate to work with her.
Wonderful. And we also have Sheila and Jeff.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us.
And your book was from Familius, and it was illustrated by Monica Mackay.
Yes, yes. The Proudest Color, and Monica is absolutely brilliant. We, as you can see from the cover, she just killed it with illustrations.
Well, awesome. So I'm going to ask us to start with, so for those listeners that haven't had the opportunity to read your books yet, I was hoping you could give us sort of a brief pitch. Why don't we start with you, Phillip, please?
Sure, not a problem. You know, I'll Be the Moon really originated several years ago, right before COVID, during, I guess, 2016-ish and on. And it's really about a little girl who wants to reconnect with her father. I'm born and raised in El Paso, Texas. And so on the US-Mexican border, stories of migration, immigration are just, it's just second nature out here. I mean, this is something that happens every single day. People on both sides of the border traveling back and forth for commerce, to live, work, and play. But we often have these stories of people wanting something more. And it's not just the southern border here, it's all over the world. People wanting to find more, whether it's economics or something like that. This is just very simply put a love story, because the little girl just wants to be with her dad. So she travels by the light of the moon with her mother across the desert, and the adventure basically begins there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Sheila and Jeff, can you give us the pitch for The Proudest Color, please?
Yeah, of course. But that I'll Be the Moon, that's so beautiful. I love that love storyline. That is very touching. So with The Proudest Color, the story is basically, it was based on research. I have my doctorate degree. Jeff is an LMFT, and we did a lot of research on race and racism and racial socialization. And at the time of its release was subsequent after George Floyd's murder. We realized there wasn't a lot of evidence-based children's books about how parents could talk about race and racism. So there were books out there about, I think, race, but not really explicitly talking about this matter of like, how can a parent take this and talk about it over the dinner table? So in this story, we wanted to combine mental health, where it's a girl named Zahra who sees and feels in color. Basically, she she sees the color, she feels sad, she sees it as blue, she feels happy, she feels it as pink. And when she feels proud, she feels it as the color brown. And that's also the color of her skin tone. So she associates pride with her skin tone. But when she goes to school, someone is discriminatory towards her. So that feeling is challenged. And so she goes to her parents and they help her understand the importance of her skin tone by reminding her of all the important people in her life that share that skin tone and the incredible things that they have done in their lives and the impact that they have made, whether it's her grandma or it's, Kamala Harris or whoever it is that she can really look up to. So in the end, that really helps reinstill her pride.
Awesome. Yeah, great. And it's amazing how picture books can be so powerful.
Yeah.
So I have a theory, which is that when I'm writing, I think a lot about I write the books that would have changed my life had I read them when I was a kid or a teen. And so I was wondering if you had a time machine, maybe it's the size of a microwave oven or something, and you could send your book back to your childhood self, what impact would that have made on your life? And why don't we start with Sheila and Jeff?
Yeah, I think research is research. So I think that writing a book is also a process of discovering yourself in some way. And with The Proudest Color, it was actually an incident that happened in first grade for me where someone pressed their arm against mine and actually was like, oh, you're really dark, you're brown. I don't like your skin tone and or skin color, and in a very first grade way. And I remember that story stayed with me, and to the point that this was actually my an essay that I wrote for graduate school that I turned into a picture book. So going back in time, I think having a book like this that I just never had seen anything like this, but actually like a story of someone feeling challenged, like that's such a vulnerable feeling and doubting yourself and your skin tone. I mean, I don't think we talk enough about that. And I think being able to see that in a bookshelf would be quite powerful. But I don't
And
know
being challenged for something you have no control over.
yeah, yeah.
What about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I think for me, it also would have helped, I think, make life a little bit less confusing about kind of where myself and my family fit into the broader scheme of things. Yeah, so I'm half Palestinian, and you kind of get used to being within your own family system, and then I didn't really get a lot of opportunities to see how that family interacted with the rest of society necessarily, being just a collectivistic culture and all. So I think it would have helped add to add clarity to where we sort of fit into all of it. But then also, I think I would have been more interested in learning more about other important figures that would have helped me develop more pride and not necessarily feel the need to justify anything or kind of like carve my place out, but just know that it's there and feel good about it.
Cool. Well, thank you. Philip, what about you?
Well, I gotta say, Lee, this was probably the one question where I kind of really gave me the most pause. I mean, I just thought, well, wow, that's a really interesting question. What would it mean to my younger self, given the fact that when I was writing it, I was really just kind of inundated with all these adult themes of kids in cages and border crossings and apprehensions and family separation and things like that. And I was trying to wrestle with the fact that how am I going to put this in the format of a children's book with great illustration and talk about some of this major stuff. And, it kind of dawned on me that the second I started thinking like that little kid again, the second I started taking it from the child's point of view in writing this book, I think the simpler it got. And isn't that always the case? Kids have a way of just kind of breaking it down for us and teaching us the lessons through simplification, right? So I think going back in time, if this book was given to me, hopefully I'm feeling more empathy. I'm understanding that I have problems, I have issues, and certainly when we're little kids, we do, and we think about stuff. But it helps me maybe understand what somebody else might be going through that could have it harder than I do. and would give me that kind of perspective so that I could continue about trying to live a happy life.
Nice. I really like that question. Thank you for all playing along. I wanted to ask some really book-specific questions. In the best way, trying not to be spoilers, but I don't think with picture books we need to worry that much about spoilers, because I think that they're books that kids read over and over and over again, or have read to them over and over again, because there's something beautiful and familiar and soothing, and they're getting more out of it each time. So, but I want to start, Philip, with I'll Be the Moon. There was one stanza that really resonated for me even after I read it, which was, and the moon is a phoenix. She rises behind us despite not knowing what happens next. And I was thinking about how you kind of leave readers not knowing exactly what happens to the child and her mother who are crossing the desert, hoping to reunite with the child's father. And that felt like a very deliberate choice on your part as the creator of the book. So I wanted you to speak a little about that.
Well, good for you for picking up on that. Because I don't like abrupt endings. You know, life isn't a 30-minute sitcom
or a 32-page picture book.
And it's awesome, and the credits roll, and we all hug and we have the happy ending, right? I mean, that would be kind of boring anyway. But when you start taking stories like this little girl and her mother who are crossing dangerous terrain to get to where they need to go, in the larger picture, there are people out there who still don't have an end to that story. And, you know, I think in all fairness, to leave the reader with what they feel could happen was really important to me. And I think it is up to us as to how our stories end up anyway. I mean, we're all the authors of our own stories. And so with this specifically, that line, and the moon is a phoenix, she rises behind us despite not knowing what happens next. I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow, much less this little girl and her mother. We have a hope, though. And I think that's what I wanted to leave readers with, is that I hope they reconnect. They're there, they're at the point, they're on the border. And, you know, that's probably just the beginning, even though the journey has been long.
Thank you. Yeah, hope is so important, I think, in kids' books.
Plus, it opens the door for the sequel.
There's going to be a sequel. Okay.
Yeah. See.
All right. And Sheila and Jeff, I was thinking a lot about I've done a bunch of books about history for kids, particularly queer history, and doing the research for that, making the decision about who do you include, who do you not include. So you have this beautiful moment as you were telling us about the Zahara's parents, you know, basically being like, look, it's not just, it's, you know, look at this incredible world of people really close to you, like your grandmother, and people that are world leaders and artists. All right, talk to me about how you made the choices.
Yeah, well, it was intentional in putting figures like that into the story, given the research on racial socialization, which is that you can help kids develop this pride in themselves by pointing out, you know, important figures that they can see themselves out in the world and have someone they can look up to and admire. But we also we tried to be mindful of a few things. One, that we didn't want it to be just that, like, kind of reiterate the sense of like you have to be exceptional to be proud, or as a minority to have to excel in some way. And so we were conscious of that, and which is why it starts off by her actually recognizing how important her grandmother is to her abuela. We also then wanted to be conscientious of, one, choosing people whose backgrounds would identify as brown, and so not mislabeling anyone, but also spanning the breadth of both careers and different communities that would consider themselves brown. And you know, it's hard. You want to be overly inclusive and bring everybody in, and then also be mindful of the space that you have in a children's book. And we also tried to be relevant to the time by having, at the time, Vice President Kamala Harris, and now, you know, presidential candidate Harris. So we'll see if we need
the pages at the end too.
Yeah, say more.
No, you pick that.
Yeah. So, and then, and what, we took advantage of a little bit more real estate with the end pages of the book. Actually, I can pull it out and show you without knocking everything over, but we
we couldn't include in the book, we were able to include it on this page. So
yeah, this is literally the back cover, the inner of the back cover. And we wanted to use this as a jumping off point too, so that it's, some characters you might recognize, some individuals you might recognize, like Mae Jameson, and then others you might not, like Faye Del Mundo or Zip Kalasa. The thinking there was then this would be a launching point for parents and children to say, we don't know who that is. Let's go online, let's go look it up. And then it's like continues to kind of build from there and build that muscle of seeking out more and building that sense of pride naturally.
I love that you snuck in more on the end paper.
so many people. Yeah.
That's great. So just for everyone watching, I just want us to be clear. I know this is, you're going to be watching this during Banned Books Week or, but we're not celebrating banning of books. We're celebrating the importance of books and the public access to books that libraries and schools provide, which lets folks that can't afford to buy books still have access to stories that can be life-saving and life-changing. And I was curious to hear from our panelists, is there a book that changed your life? Or in other words, is there a library or book memory story that you could share with us? And we'll take it in Jeff, Sheila, and then Philip, please.
Sure. This was a tough question and I appreciate it. I really had to think back. The one that kept standing out in my mind though was a book called The Vision by Tom Brown Jr. He's a well-known, I guess, naturalist and tracker. He helps find people lost in the wilderness. I think the veracity of the book's been called into question over time, but regardless, I always loved the messages around learning about Native American lands and culture, and especially the importance of like slowing down and really taking into account the very fine details of things and recognizing how much we can miss and the value and sometimes slowing down to really expand one's understanding of themselves and the world, and also just personal challenge and overcoming things that seemed unsurmountable. So it was a book that I kind of come back to from time to time and reflect on. I've even used it when I've led outdoor trips for people before. And, the beginning of a trip, people get really excited and want to take pictures of everything. And then I'll pause at some sort of vista and read a passage of it. And it gets everyone to kind of slow down and you feel the whole trip shift where people are more engaged in what's happening. And even just the volume of the trip comes down where people just want to experience what they're in their environment and what they're seeing a bit more. So that's the one that came up for me.
Yeah. So this was also a great question. I think for me would be in high school, we read Beloved by Toni Morrison. And just from that first line of the dedication to the 60 million and more, where it's dedicated to the Africans and their descendants that had died in the slave trade, is already just like this powerful beginning. And then it's just a story that you cannot forget, that really stays with you and has so many different layers and themes to it. And actually in preparation for this conversation, I had looked that book up and I was genuinely shocked. And I don't know why I was shocked that it's currently being banned across a lot of different schools. And it was one of those books that it's still in my library from high school with highlighted with my notes. And it just made me really sad. Yeah.
But how neat that you kept on to it all these years.
Yeah, it's a powerful book from the first line, right? You can't forget something like that.
Yeah. Philip, what about you?
Yeah, another tough question because, I can think of very specific instances where just being in a bookmobile for the first time, growing up in a smaller suburb outside of El Paso, we didn't have a library. And in the summertime, to kind of help keep us occupied, we'd have to walk to a convenience store a few blocks down where the bookmobile would just show up in the summertime. And triple digit West Texas heat. By the time you reach the thing, you probably sweat 5 pounds. But when you opened up the doors, just this air that just hit you and this comfort that I had, and just smelling the books. So that was awesome in itself. from a book standpoint, there's several. I think Parrot in the Oven is something by Victor Martinez, written a while back, but it spoke to me. These were short stories that encapsulated Victor's life. And I just saw so much of my family and of my upbringing and some of the characters, his brothers, his dad, and the problems that he may have had at the time, the good stuff. It's as if he was talking to me, and I appreciated that so much. And then, lately, I think as the reading has expanded over time, I think people like Khaled Hosseini are just unbelievable. I mean, The Kite Runner certainly changed my perspective, and it was absolutely an education, having all brothers. So it was kind of like a really guy-centered story of these two kids as they grew, and they're, the whole backdrop being Afghanistan. And I just thought, wow, how fascinating that I can be introduced to this world. But his next book, A Thousand Splendid Suns, really, really did change me as a father of three girls. It gave me a different perspective on the female version of things, right? And the plight in Afghanistan. And it just, I just, in general, Lee, I always tell kids when I go to schools, just get lost in them. Think of these things as portals that'll take you to another multiverse. And you don't have to spend a dime on it. Go to your library and just get lost in it, visualize it and let it take you. So I know we're not celebrating banned books, but I do feel that, we've been given the what, whether it's visual media, broadcast, whatever, we're always given the what, and we're always used to kind of like reading headlines or scrolling through. We need these books in our libraries because they help explain the why. And I think that's extremely important.
There's Dr. I believe Ruth Bishop Sims. I may have inverted the middle and the last name, but she wrote this article about the idea that books are windows into someone else's life. They are mirrors reflecting your experiences back to you, and they're also sliding glass doors that allow us to sort of like enter into someone else's world. And I think that it gets quoted a lot. I mean, it gets misquoted a lot, but the idea of it both reflecting and giving you access into someone else's life. I mean, I think on the surface, we can all think that, oh wow, we're so different, right? Like whether it's skin color or where we come from, but at core, we're all the same. We all have so much, more in common than we do differently. And I think books are those sort of empathy machines, right? Like they help us see the similarities. And I think it's interesting because writing picture books in particular, they're very difficult to kind of like get right. I have 2 picture books out, and definitely, people look at them and they're like, oh, it's so short, it must be really easy to write a picture book. But actually, I think they're way harder than writing books for older kids or even for adults, because in a sense, you do have to do that distillation that, Philip, you were talking about. Like you have to get it down so, you have to really see it from the child's perspective. And I think both of your books did that really successfully. So thank you for that. So I guess my next question is, it's looping a little bit back to the We Are Stronger Than Censorship campaign, because the point of the campaign or the program is to get your books into the hands of many more young people and their families all across the US. And I would love to hear what you hope each of those readers gains from reading your books, or basically really sitting with an adult and having the books read to them, because that's how picture books are generally shared with the youngest kids. Let's start with Philip, please.
Yeah, thanks. Our political discourse today, has taken a turn. Obviously, people are vilified people who look different, people who come from different places, have been mischaracterized in a huge way. So, I mean, certainly I could totally get into that, right? But when it comes to just this book and the people who read it, young and old, at the end of the day, it's really, can we understand that this is a child and the child wants to reconnect with her father? And that's why I know the subtitle says it's a migrant child's story, but it's a love story. And I always say, hey, listen, you know, to any adult who wants to kind of challenge, and I've had it, you know, I've had these people, some people come up to me and they're afraid of that word, migrant, you know, and it's only a matter of time really before maybe it gets challenged, right? Because of that word, because there's just a stigma around it today. And so I'm prepared for that, but I want people to have more empathy. I want them to put themselves in that child's shoes, or more importantly, if I'm talking to an adult, I want them to put themselves in the parent's role, in the mother's role, or the father who's waiting, by the way, anxiously on another side, going through his own inner hell, just waiting, right? Hoping. So if we can have more empathy, I think we can talk about larger issues of equality, of anything we want, right? We could solve more problems if we just had that empathy. And I've always said that that's just kind of like a muscle we're all born with. Just we don't always flex it, and we have to exercise that, you know?
Nice. I like it. So read the book to build your empathy muscles.
Yeah.
Perfect. Sheila, Jeff, what about you all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the American landscape is diversifying. I mean, this is a reality that we're in, and it's beautiful. And I think that with the Proudest Color, the reality also is that there are kids that don't will ask like, oh, your skin tone is different than mine. Children are naturally curious beings. Research shows at the age of 6 months, a 6-month-old can discern between skin tone and can stare longer at the skin tone that they don't understand or they're not familiar with. So I think that we have all of this science in front of us, and I think science is now a new trigger word, unfortunately, but it's there. And I think that books like this point to the reality and then are here to help you have the conversation, not to hurt or to take away, but to mend and to make sure that we're walking a walk of healing toward things that maybe words that have hurt before. And how can we make sure that this generation of children are able to have the tools that they need to have difficult conversations, and their parents as well. So I do think that that's the hope, is that I really see our book as research or evidence-based tools for healing.
Yeah, and we hope that we can take the fear out of having these conversations within families, and so we even included a sort of a guide in the book for parents to facilitate these conversations. That also gives them some reinforcement to feel confident in it as well. You know, as mental health clinicians, we try to help people when they're in a challenging experience where, you know, the impulse or the natural reaction is to kind of like narrow in and tighten up a little bit to protect oneself, to find that sense of safety and then expand one's perspective so that they can see things that maybe they hadn't seen before. And so we kind of tried to take that approach, just as Tamir Zahra's, which was, you know, her sense of pride got challenged and it kind of tightened in, where she was like, maybe I don't want to be this skin color. And her parents confidently helped her kind of feel safe and then expand through that. And that kind of actually, I think, is a theme we're trying to carry through in subsequent books that we've been working on.
Good for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is an excellent segue into what is the next book for Jeff and Sheila. How do you imagine that you're taking that theme into the next?
Yeah. So we've, oftentimes in these communities, families have someone or many people with someone who speaks with an accent, English with an accent. And so we, in that vein of shifting perspective and gaining a sense of pride, similarly, a child experiences shame and ridicule for his mom, who is has an accent, and
This is
how
the next book he's talking about.
yes, it's our
yeah.
next book. Yeah, that we're excited will be published. It's targeted for fall of 26. Is, you know, how an accent actually represents a lot of bravery and a full story, and
It means you speak two languages.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
actually a
there's
strength. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of cool things about an accent, and I think that having family members with accents, I think we're excited to highlight that. So yeah.
Well, being the child of immigrants with parents who had really strong accents, I would have loved that book, honestly. Philip, how about you? You mentioned
I
the
could talk to
sequel.
you guys for hours about that. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I did allude to the fact, you know, of a sequel, like, and so I think really the next project is really going to center around the father. There is another side to that story, and there's another side to this border, and they're really trying to reconnect with him in I'll Be the Moon. But, you know, there is a line from the very last line of this book where she'll keep pushing forward towards the light of the moon and the promise of the sun. And so I'm really playing with the promise of the sun and the word promise here. And the promise is maybe this father is going to keep, or, you know, to try and achieve as soon as he gets to see his little girl again, as a father would want to do. So that hopefully 2026, right alongside with your follow-up, guys, I hope to be sitting with you and talking about it more.
Be a privilege.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Gave me chills. That's amazing. Oh my goodness.
That sounds great. Well, I really want to thank you, Philip, and you, Jeff, and you, Sheila, for everyone watching. If you want to help get diverse books like these into the hands of the kids and families for whom it will be life-changing, join us. The hope is that We Are Stronger Than Censorship puts brakes on the runaway train of book banning, and you can help. There are lots of ways to support. You can donate. Every $16 buys 2 books to respond to 1 book challenge. You can get some stronger merch, like the t-shirt I'm wearing, which says "Strong Like a Reader." And you can also sign up for updates and weekly banned book shopping lists, and you can spread the word. And you can also ask for these books at your local library. There's so many more ways to get involved. Please check out Be Strong, Things to Do About Book Banning. It's a post at our wearestronger-than-censorship.org. And thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.